There's a certain kind of person who doesn't feel lonely when they're alone. They feel exposed when they're surrounded. They walk into crowded rooms and immediately scan for exits, not because they hate people, but because people require something from them that feels like bleeding. Every conversation becomes a performance. Every silence needs filling. Every glance carries expectation. And somewhere between the smiling and the nodding, they lose track of who they actually are. You've probably seen them. The ones who vanish early from gatherings. The ones who choose a quiet evening over loud company without hesitation. The ones who seem content in their own company, almost too content. Society calls them antisocial, withdrawn, maybe even broken. But if you look closer, you'll notice something different. They're not running from connection. They're protecting something fragile inside themselves that the world keeps trying to reshape. Psychology has a name for this. It's called introversion, but that barely scratches the surface. Because this goes deeper than needing time to recharge. This is about nervous systems that interpret social interaction as a low-grade threat. About minds that have learned through experience that vulnerability in the presence of others often comes with a cost. If this perspective resonates, you can support the video by liking it. Think about how this forms. A child sits at the dinner table, sharing something that matters to them. A parent dismisses it. A sibling mocks it. The room laughs, not with cruelty necessarily, but with casual indifference. The child learns a quiet lesson. Your inner world is not safe out loud. Over time, these small moments accumulate. Each one teaches the nervous system that exposure equals risk, that sharing yourself invites judgment or misunderstanding, or worse, complete disinterest. The brain, trying to protect you, begins to associate solitude with safety. Not because you hate people, but because being alone is the only time you don't have to manage someone else's reaction to you. Comment solitude if this describes your experience. You stop performing. You stop translating your thoughts into palatable language. You stop shrinking or expanding to fit the shape others expect. You just exist without the exhausting choreography that connection demands. Psychologists studying attachment styles have found that people with avoidant attachment often prefer solitude, not from lack of desire for closeness, but from fear of the instability that comes with it. They've learned that people leave, that promises break, that today's warmth becomes tomorrow's coldness without warning. So the mind, in its defensive wisdom, chooses the predictable isolation over the unpredictable intimacy. It's not about being strong enough to be alone. It's about being too tired to keep bracing for disappointment. There's also a sensory component that gets overlooked. Some people process stimulation differently. The hum of conversation, the energy of a room, the constant adjustment to shifting social dynamics. All of this registers as noise to a nervous system wired for quiet. Researchers studying highly sensitive people have documented that roughly 15 to 20% of the population has a more reactive sensory processing system. For them, solitude isn't loneliness. It's the absence of overwhelming input. It's where their mind finally stops defending itself and starts simply being. But society doesn't make space for this. You're taught that connection is the goal, that relationships measure your worth, that if you're comfortable alone, something must be wrong with you. This creates a strange internal conflict. The world insists you should crave what exhausts you. Your nervous system insists otherwise. And caught between these truths, you start to feel defective. Type YES If this helped you understand something about yourself, here's what often gets missed. People who feel safer in solitude aren't incapable of connection. Many of them long for it deeply, but they crave a specific kind. The kind that doesn't require constant maintenance. The kind where silence isn't uncomfortable. The kind built on depth rather than frequency. They want intimacy without the performance, presence without the pressure. And when they can't find that, they choose their own company over the hollow version society offers. This is where the psychology becomes interesting. Because the same person who withdraws from surface-level interaction often forms intensely meaningful bonds with the few they let in. Studies on attachment show that avoidant individuals, when they do connect, often do so with remarkable loyalty and emotional investment. The difference is selectivity. They don't cast a wide net. They wait. They watch. And when they finally open the door, they mean it completely. But waiting can feel like withering. If someone you know might benefit from this, feel free to share it. The world moves fast. It rewards extroversion, visibility, constant engagement. And the person who needs time, who processes internally, who recharges in stillness, can start to feel left behind. They see others building networks while they build nothing. Others laughing in groups while they sit alone, and the doubt creeps in. Maybe I am broken. Maybe I'm missing something essential. This doubt is compounded by misunderstanding. When someone chooses solitude, people assume rejection. They assume coldness or arrogance. They don't see the overstimulation, the exhaustion, the quiet need for space to simply breathe without being observed. And so the person who seeks solitude often carries the weight of others' misinterpretation. They're labeled when all they wanted was to exist without explanation. What's rarely discussed is the grief in this. The grief of living in a world that wasn't designed for your pace. Of wanting connection but fearing its demands. Of feeling most yourself when alone but longing to be understood by someone who stays. It's a tender ache, this contradiction. And it lives quietly in those who navigate it, unspoken, because speaking it requires the very exposure they've learned to avoid. If this gave you clarity, comment clarity below. Psychology offers some relief here. Understanding that your preference for solitude isn't pathology, but wiring helps. Recognizing that your nervous system simply operates differently removes the shame. You're not defective for needing what you need. You're just honest about your limits in a culture that pathologizes boundaries. The truth is, solitude can be deeply nourishing. It's where creativity grows, where thoughts form without interruption, where you meet yourself without the distortion of others' projections. People who feel safer alone often develop rich inner lives. They become observers, thinkers, creators. They learn to befriend silence in ways the constantly connected never do. And that friendship, that capacity to be alone without loneliness, is its own form of strength. But it's also important to acknowledge what gets lost. Connection, even difficult connection, shapes us. It teaches us things solitude cannot. How to hold tension, how to repair after conflict, how to be seen and stay anyway. Those who avoid it to completely risk calcification. The walls that protect can also imprison, and the same solitude that once felt safe can eventually become a cage you didn't notice building. Perhaps the answer isn't choosing one over the other. Perhaps it's learning to discern when solitude serves and when it isolates, when your need for space is healing and when it's hiding. This requires brutal honesty with yourself. Are you resting or are you running? Are you protecting your peace or are you avoiding growth? There's no universal answer. Each person must find their own balance. Some will always need more solitude than connection. That's not wrong, it's just true. Others will need to gently push against their comfort, learning that safe connection exists, even if past experience taught otherwise. Both paths are valid. Both require courage. What matters is that you stop apologizing for your nature. If you feel safer in solitude, honor that. Build your life around it instead of against it. Find the few who respect your rhythms. Create space for connection that doesn't demand you abandon yourself. And if you're someone who loves a person like this, understand, their withdrawal isn't about you. It's about them trying to stay whole in a world that constantly asks them to fragment. Did this shift how you see yourself or someone you know? Share your experience in the comments. If understanding the psychology behind solitude brought you clarity, consider subscribing. This channel explores the quiet truths of human nature, the parts we rarely name but deeply feel. You're not alone in needing space. You're just wired to protect what matters most. And that's not weakness. That's wisdom disguised as distance.